Some of you have probably worked with Micron pens before, and there may be a few of you who have not. These are a technical pen. They're really cool because they have a really fine point, and they do have different sizes. So I want to show you this, that if you look on the side, they have numbers. So the numbers are in purple. There are 005 for this one, and they're also on the cap. It's really important that the cap and the pen actually are the same number so we don't get them mixed up. For those of you who are newbies to this, here's what the pen point looks like. It's a very little precise point. It's very delicate too. This kind of pen is really great for getting in details. You can control it really well, way better than you can a pencil point or a paintbrush. So it's very fine tipped. That being said, you're going to have to be extremely gentle with it. We talked about pressure and how much pressure your hand is exerting the other day. You need to have a really loose grip on this. So your fingers should be placed a little bit above that third line there. There's like some indentations. You want to be on that kind of barrel of the pen there, the shiny part of the pen, and not quite all the way to the edge. So my hand is just where that writing begins, covering some of it, my fingertips. You don't want to hold the pen too close to the point. You won't have as much control and you'll end up getting achy hands. All right, so here is the exercise that we're going to be doing today. Some of you have probably done this before. It's pretty basic, but value scale is something that you'll hear again and again. Not just here in this class, but throughout your art career. If you do any other art classes, we talk about it all the time. Even up at the master's level, you talk about value. Value is incredibly important to shading and rendering and making something look 3D. So we're doing this whole scale in different types or different methods of shading. So the first one is a hatch, the second one is a cross hatch. The third scale is a scribble, and the last one is stipple, which is dotting. When you're doing the first box, like I'm just doing the first one of each value scale, you want to have a lot of space in between your marks. The more space you have, the lighter it's going to appear. So the first box should not be white. It should be very loosely spaced. So for your scribbles, you can do like curly cues, which is what I'm doing, like a repeating of S's. You could also make them kind of angular. They can be edgy. You know how like when you make a star, you could be kind of like that, but on the first one, you got to go really loose. And just with the value scale, you have to keep in mind, you're starting out really loose and you're progressively tightening up that space, covering more and more of the white area until the last one is almost black. So those dots there need to be very spaced apart. Okay, and I'm going to also show you the darkest one. So this is the very last box in the value scale, so it's number 6, and you just want to make sure you're covering everything, all the white. The cross hatching, I'm going angle to angle, so 2 opposite diagonals there, and you can go back and forth. One thing when you're doing all these marks, it looks like I'm going fast because it's in time lapse. You actually don't want to go fast, you want to go slow. If you go too fast, what's going to happen is you're going to bleed out the pen. Then you'll have a pen that is dry. So what you're going to do is work slow across the paper. You want to remember to breathe deeply when you're doing it, kind of relax in the process. Don't try and push it, don't try and rush through. And there should be 2 markers per person in each box, so for a total of 10 markers. There's 005s and 003. I'm using a 003 on here. It doesn't matter which one you really use. One has a finer point than the other. The dotting one takes a long time. If you are at the dotting one and you feel like you need to take a break because it's driving you nuts, you can. I would just move on and do a different square, or move on to the next task and then like come back to this one a little bit later. When you're doing dotting, it's really important that you're not doing a woodpecker movement, so you're not like tap, 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 tapping on your surface. You're coming down at a delicate, gentle angle when you're doing that, so you're not bending the tip. Like I said, these tips are delicate, they're fragile. You're gonna have to be very careful with how much pressure you're putting on that point. Also, when you're doing shading and when you're using materials in art, you want to be able to kind of feel down through your fingertips to the point of the pen. You want to kind of visualize the pen as an extension of your fingertips. You have to sensitize yourself to that. That's going to lead to more control. All right, so we're going to go down to those lower boxes that you've put in just below the value scales. And you're going to be using a stencil. I know it's kind of cheating, right? To get a circle. So I want you to use the largest circle stencil that you have on there. If you have one with a whole bunch of different other shapes, like if you have some with rectangular shapes, there are a few that have entirely circles, and you want to use kind of like a medium-sized one. I don't know what the measurements are. It's probably close to like 1 inch all the way around. So you're going to use a pencil for this at first. If you outline it with pen, it's going to make it look cheesy, like a coloring book page, and it's also going to make it look flat. And the point of this is not to get a flat object, but to get a three-dimensional one. So a three-dimensional version of a circle is a sphere. So we start with the pencil, and then you go back to using the pen. So on this one, I'm going to be doing the scribble technique. And you have 3 boxes to do. And in each box, you're going to practice a different technique. So you don't have to do all 4 of those techniques, hatching, cross-hatching, scribble, stipple. You can just pick your 3 favorite. Or you can do a combination of 2. Like on the hatching and cross-hatching, you can do both of them at the same time. So what you do want to pay attention to is the form and making it look like it's turning or 3D. And you do that by understanding that the light is coming from the upper left and that the shadow and the cast shadow will be on the right. So I'm starting off with the form shadow, that shadow that's directly on to the sphere. And you can see it looks like a crescent moon, right? It looks kind of like a dark crescent moon. There is a little bit of reflected light on that right-hand edge, so I'm not going to go as dark. I'm also going a little bit lighter than I think I will have to, because I don't want to mess it up, and just in case I need to go in and darken areas, I'll still have some areas that are light, like in the reflected light. So go a little bit lighter than you think. Don't make it so tight that it's really, really dark. And you want to decide which is going to be your darker shadow. Is it going to be your form shadow or the shadow that's on the ground? It's called the cast shadow. So I'm going to opt for the cast shadow being the darkest one on all of these. So I'm going to make sure my cast shadow is really dark in comparison to the form shadow. That means that I'll have to fill in all the little gaps. Now, the thing about a cast shadow is the farther away it goes from the object itself, the lighter it starts to get, and it gets a little bit blurrier on the edge. So you just have to realize that the shadow starts out super dark and then it kind of fades as it moves away. Ooh. So I've just sped this up a little bit. I'm working on the background now. And the thing about the background is, just like with the cast shadow, you got to pick what's going to be darker. Is the background going to be darker than the form, than the sphere itself, or vice versa? So I'm opting to make the background a little bit lighter than the sphere itself. I mean, obviously not as light as the lightest part, but lighter than the shadow, the form shadow. So that means I'm going to have to go in and touch it up because it's not done yet. Here's where I'm going to fine tune. So I'm going in on that form shadow side on the sphere, and I'm getting that a little bit darker. I still want a little bit of reflected light on the edge there to the right. And it is okay to leave like that bald patch of white where the light's really the most intense. That's okay. And we're working really small here, so we're not going to get super detailed on this. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece at this stage, and it's so small. It's just more of a practice to see how you're wrapping your line around the form and whether or not you can make something look 3D with pen and ink. So that's pretty much all you really need to have for one of these spheres. That's all you need to do. I'm gonna show you one more sphere before you try it on your own. There you go. So same kind of deal where I've outlined in pencil first and then I go back in with the pen. This is going to be a hatching, cross hatching. For this one, it's a little bit more complicated than doing the scribble. You really have to curve your line around that sphere. Picture you taking like a thread and wrapping it around a ball, like a golf ball or a tennis ball. How would that thread look as it's wrapping around that ball? So you have to curve your lines to make it feel like form. You want to go denser in that form shadow. The value pattern is going to be the exact same as what you did as what you saw on the scribble one. So there's kind of that crescent of dark there for the form shadow. And I'm going multiple directions here. I'm going to do a little bit of cross hatching. The cross hatch I put in there is also wrapping around the form too to help make it look like a ball. Same deal with the cast shadow. I'm going darker on the cast shadow than I intend to go on the form shadow. And the thing with ink is you cannot erase, so if you accidentally go too dark, you're either going to have to compensate it by making another area darker or just dealing with it. And this is an exercise, so it's really low pressure. You don't have to be perfect. This one should take a little bit longer than the scribble. It takes a little bit more time. And I'm putting just a straight up hatch in the background there. And a hatch is just one line, it's not crossing over. And I'm making sure I understand like the hatch is going to be lighter, the background is going to be lighter than the form shadow on the sphere. Okay, I mean there's a little bit of fine tuning that can occur, but that's pretty much all you have to do.